Hey guys, I'm here with McKay. So excited about this podcast, fellow American. We've just been talking about the election. She has POTS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and we're just gonna kind of talk all about all things like POTS and EDS, advocating for yourself with doctors, and then kind of dealing with that phase that's undiagnosed. Hi McKay, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you.
How you going?
Good, just stressed. 2020 is not my favorite year.
It's one of those years, hey?
Oh.
So at the time of this recording, yesterday was election day in America, and we still don't have the results. What's the atmosphere like there?
I feel like in my city, it's fine because I'm in a very small city, but I've seen like a bunch of videos like on TikTok of like New York City has boarded up like every store and like movie theater and stuff so that if there's rioting, there like nothing will be broken into. Like I've seen tons of that stuff, so I think everything is just kind of chaotic here at the moment. Yeah.
And how do you think that affects, like, in terms of your chronic health issues and all of that? Like, are you worried about the future of the people in the chronic illness community in America and how they're going to be advocated for and all of that?
Yeah, I'm really worried about that. Like, especially if Trump gets elected again. I haven't specifically looked into like Biden's policies on like disabled people and stuff like that, but like I've like heard stuff about like what Trump has said, just like I don't know, like he makes fun of people with it, and he like has a bunch of like policies that like make it way harder for people to get jobs and like accommodations and school and stuff like that. So I think I'm worried that like the chronic illness community is going to lose even more like rights that we already don't have, if that makes sense. Like I feel like the
more of a voice
is going to widen.
Yeah, and the gap is gonna widen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a really strange time. Even for me, I'm very removed from it because I grew up in America and then have been living overseas for many years. But whatever happens in the election does, to some extent, have an effect on the rest of the world. People are watching. It's an anxious time. I mean, I've been anxious and but also almost excited as well. It's like this anxiety, but also excitement. And I think it's just an interesting time, and regardless of what happens, America is quite divided. And my hope is that from this, we can start to rebuild. Americans can start to rebuild relationships, and maybe people will be more engaged with American politics now. Like record numbers of voters have shown up at the polls, etc. So
93 million people voted early, which is like insane. So I don't know.
Well, and the bottom line is like whoever is elected as president of the United States is super important, but change really happens on a state and grassroots level, right? So if we can be more engaged in politics, whether it be one way or the other, if we can be more engaged in politics sort of like on that yearly, everyday, like community grassroots level, I think that could have a really positive impact on the country, you know?
Yeah, I think so too. I'm hoping things get better from here. But
yeah,
that's all we have, right? Hope. So other than that, how's your week been?
It's been good. I haven't done very much. I have just been like doing schoolwork and taking a lot of naps and watching TV. So what about you?
It's been a week where I have been eating a lot of not good things.
Yes, same. I don't know why.
Sometimes I let myself have times like that. I think that this is probably the last day where that's gonna happen, because I'm starting to feel it. Like my skin is breaking out a little bit. Like I can't be eating junk food all the time.
Mine does that too. After I eat like a lot of chocolate or something specifically.
Yep,
my body's like, no.
So, and then I have a couple of university assessments due, and it's a crazy time. But look, I'm done in a week and a half, and the election's over soon, and things will hopefully calm down.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's, I guess, been my week. So switching topics to one of my favorite segments. What is your pet peeve?
I would say my biggest one is when someone starts saying something and then they're like, never mind, I can't tell you that. And I'm like, you can't say that. Like, you can't, like, if you think of something midway through and realize you don't want to say it, like, shift it to something else, or like just pretend you were going to say something different. Like, don't say I can't tell you because now I want to know. Like, I hate that. I hate it.
How do you respond to them?
I kind of annoy them until they tell me. So I'm like,
yeah, because there's obviously a part of them that wants to tell you, right? Otherwise they wouldn't have started to say it.
Yes. Yeah. No. And it kind of depends how comfortable I am with the person. If it's someone I don't know very well, I'm just kind of like, whatever. But if it's like one of my really good friends, I'm like, you're going to tell me. Like, you can't do
you're
that.
You're not keeping this from me.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of like friends and all of that, how is like, because you obviously have EDS and POTS, and that has like a pretty big effect on your everyday life. Like what's that look like for you to have friendships in this season? And kind of, I know like this is totally not like what we're going to talk about, and we'll get to that, but like just out of curiosity,
like with my friendships, like in general, or with like the chronic illness community and my
friendships in general.
I feel like it's kind of taken like a toll on some of my friendships because I've been so focused on it lately, because like I didn't have answers for so many years about what was going on, and like that was hard. But then like the last few months I've been able to figure out what it was, so I've been kind of like hyper focused on like, okay, I have a like game plan on like, let's do this. So I find that I don't really know what to talk about with my friends as much, because they're like, how are you? And I'm like, well, I'm kind of stressed. And it's always about the same thing, and I just feel like there's only so many times I can talk about it, but nothing else is really going on, if that makes sense. But like I've also had people be like super supportive too. It's just been kind of a different shift that I don't know how to completely navigate.
Yeah, it's for I mean, I totally, when I had chronic fatigue, it'd be like, people would be like, how you going, like what's been happening, and in my head I'm like, I have chronic fatigue syndrome and can barely get out of bed, so that's how that's going.
Yeah, it's like it's the same every time you ask me. Like
you don't want to like say that because they don't know what like they get. Yeah.
When I
almost feel like, oh wait, no, you go.
No, go ahead.
I almost feel like after I tell people like more in depth about like how I actually am doing, like I almost have to like comfort them afterwards. I don't know if you ever had that, be like, oh yeah, I can't get out of bed, I'm in pain, and then they're like really upset, and I'm like, oh, but it's fine. Like I don't know, like I feel like I have to make it.
Yep, definitely. There's so many times where I have to do that. It's like, yeah, you have to comfort them. When I had chronic fatigue syndrome, I had this one friend who also had some fatigue issues. She was in chronic pain. She got in like 3 different car accidents and was dealing with that. Childhood trauma, blah, blah, blah. And so she'd come over and we'd sit there and just talk about how much pain we were in and how much life sucked, and like, and our conversations always ended with like, this sucks, but we're gonna get through it. But there was this wallowing a little bit. It's so important, and that's why I think with Instagram and this chronic illness community that's kind of coming up, and what you're doing and what you're building, like it's so important to have those people that you can talk to, and it's like, this is how I'm feeling, but then the community builds you up. It's like, feel your feelings, but let's keep going and keep fighting and keep staying positive.
yeah, that's what I love about it, because I feel like because I have been hyper focused on it, I've also found people that are like, I don't want to say doing the same thing, but like I found a way to like still do something with it, like connecting with other people in that way, like in the chronic illness community. So it's like been really cool at the same time. So yeah.
And have you found like some friends and stuff that you like catch up with and all of that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of people that like I catch up with, like a few in particular that like we check up on each other frequently that I wouldn't have like met otherwise. So it's been pretty cool. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I have a few as well. Like I'm still feeling like I'm quite new to the community, so I haven't as much. But there's some people that I meet a lot of people. Some people I talk to, I connect immediately with them. And it's like within 5 minutes you're sharing your deepest, darkest secrets and traumas.
Because they get it. Yeah. Like, this is my life story, and they're like, me too. It's just like, it's so different when you don't have to explain it. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's like a base level understanding, and then from there, whereas with friends it's a little bit, it can be challenging. And I mean, I definitely had really good friends around me, but they didn't understand, and I never would have wanted them to understand, because you don't wish that on someone. But it's also a bit like, I can tell you, but you're not going to understand how hard it is.
Yeah.
And
I need someone to understand.
Yes.
So you said you recently just got diagnosed with like EDS and POTS, and
yeah,
obviously it was kind of a long journey for you from not having a diagnosis to having a diagnosis to having suspicions. So what was like that season like advocating for yourself with doctors?
It was exhausting, and I don't want to say traumatic, but like kind of like it just, I feel like I haven't ever really like advocated for myself until like the last few months. As soon as I found out what EDS was, I was like, I have that. Like, I know I have that. And then like same with POTS. So I feel like it was kind of different then, because just like growing up, I had never had any clue what was going on. And so I didn't know how to push back and be like, no, I know something's wrong, because all the tests were coming back normal. But as soon as like I had an idea of like, I think this is what it is, like I just like
you pushed,
kept making appointments. Like my primary care physician was just like not helpful and was like fighting me on every referral I wanted. And it took me like 2 months to get all the referrals I wanted, but I kept going. Like I kept going and going, and like eventually annoyed her into sending all of them. So I guess I just like.
So how did you find out or figure out that you had EDS?
It kind of gets foggy on this. It kind of just happened. Like it came together in like one day. I posted something on Instagram about like how I was having GI issues, and someone messaged me and they were like, hey, you might have EDS. Like it kind of sounds like some of the other things you've mentioned, and it can cause GI issues. And I looked it up and I was like, I don't think that really fits. And she was like, no, like look at the hypermobile type. And I was like, okay. So I looked that up and I was like, oh, like that could be it. And then I like looked a video. I searched it on YouTube, like a video on it, and I found this one channel and I started watching it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can do all of those things, because she was like going over the diagnostic criteria. And so then I called my mom and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I know what it is. Like it's this thing. Yeah. And she had been talking to someone in her family that like had just heard about what EDS was, and she said it reminded her of me, and said that she needed to talk to me about it. And so I called her about this, and she was like, oh, like that's what they said too, that like they think you might have that. So yeah, that's.
And you were, and from that point on, you were like on a vendetta to get a diagnosis, an official diagnosis.
Yes.
I love that.
And I think that's important. Just in that is the importance of spreading awareness around it, right? And so what is EDS? What are these different illnesses? How do they affect people? And how do we get it? Because once you get a diagnosis, that's where, I mean, the healing can start to come, or at least living better and fuller within the confines or within sort of the limitations of the chronic illness that you have. So it's interesting because even with chronic fatigue syndrome, like I would tell people about it and they had no idea. So then I'd explain to them what it was. But now, and this was 4 or 5 years ago, but now when I explain to people, especially in Australia, most people know what chronic fatigue syndrome is because it affects a large part of the population actually. But it's because there's that awareness, and then I've had people come to me and say, "Oh, I think I might have chronic fatigue syndrome," or I've started to notice the early signs of chronic fatigue in some people, and I'm stop them, and I'm just like, "Look, you need to be really careful right now about resting and looking after yourself because I don't want to tell you you're gonna get it, but I just want to let you know that this could happen."
And be like, take it easier then.
So when you kind of got to the point where you thought that you were pretty convinced that you had EDS and POTS, and again, this is interesting because a lot of people, I think, go on the internet, find resources, and self-diagnose, actually. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing because it gives us something to go off of, right? But there's also that medical component of you do actually need to have a proper diagnosis. You could be wrong. You're not a doctor. You haven't done the test. When you finally decided, what was that like advocating for yourself with the doctors, with the specialists? And even just with your primary care physician, she or he pushed back.
Right.
How did you navigate that?
I think something that helped me was as soon as I found out what EDS and POTS were, I did a lot of research. So I guess the whole self-diagnosing thing, but I didn't just do the self-diagnosing part. I did a ton of research on what tests they do to diagnose it, what doctors can help, what the treatments are. And I even watched a bunch of videos on how to get your doctor to believe you stuff. So I had an agenda. I guess I had a very clear picture of these are the steps to get the diagnosis and these are the tests I want to do to prove that I have it, if that makes sense. So when my primary care was not wanting to refer me, I was no, I need a tilt table test for POTS because that's how you diagnose it, or I need to go to a cardiologist and a geneticist for EDS. So I don't know, I feel I just kind of had an agenda and I stuck to it. I had a list of things that I knew would help me get that diagnosis. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really important. I think even just for the community, setting up a game plan.
Yeah.
And especially, and what's sad is that doctors are that's their job, right? That's what they're meant to be doing. But at the end of the day, nobody cares more about your health than you.
Yeah. And knows your body better.
And knows your body. Even just for me with chronic fatigue, I got diagnosed by a doctor. It was a naturopath. She was a naturopath. So she was a bit more on the alternative side, and that was really good. But once I got the diagnosis, she was pretty convinced I was going to recover, but it was up to me to kind of figure out the next steps. We did allergy testing and all of that, and it was a lot of gut related stuff. But yeah, I had to put together a game plan, and then I had to see another doctor, and then I had to see another doctor.
Yeah.
So I guess the takeaway from that as well is do your research, put together a plan. And even I would suggest, did you go to your appointments alone or did you have people with you?
That's actually something I wanted to bring up is because I had my agenda of things that I wanted to do and tests and referrals I wanted. And my primary care was just not listening. And so eventually I had my mom come with me. And the last appointment I had with her, I had a list of the referrals I'd been asking for 2 months and she sent all of them. So beforehand, I sat down with my mom And I was like, okay, like if she says I don't need this thing, like how can you respond to that? So I think that might be a good idea for other people, is like bring someone with you and ahead of time think about possible ways they could dismiss you and like how you want your person with you to push back on that so that you can get the referrals you need or whatever. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, totally. That's super important. I remember taking my mom as well to my first appointments and it wasn't as much because I needed an advocate, more like I just was unwell. I needed someone there with me to, I don't know, to like just be there. And I had come back from living overseas for 3 years and going to doctor's appointments alone and being dismissed time after time after time. And I was just like, I don't want to do this alone anymore. And so there's definitely like that invitation to say, oh, like you don't have to do this alone. Set up a plan, or even ask someone else. If you don't have capacity, ask someone to sit down with you, make a plan of what you need, like what are the outcomes that you want out of these appointments. But here's my question: do you ever think about seeing a different primary care physician?
Yes, so that's actually part of it. Is one of my friends was like, you realize that the doctors are working for you and you can fire them at any time, right? Like you realize that. And I was like, yes, but the problem was that I had like just switched I just switched primary care doctors because now that I'm over 18, I couldn't go to my normal one. And because of COVID, the waiting list was like 3 months. Like it took me forever to get into her. And so I was like, I really want those referrals now. Like I didn't want to have to like switch to a different primary care and not get in for months and then have the referrals take months. So I was like, I'm just gonna get the referrals I need from her and then I'm gonna switch. So now I have everything I need. So now I'm looking for another one. So
that's actually a good point. I mean, I think it's just one of those things, you have to work the system. As much as it's sad. And even in America, I know some people think that it's so accessible, even though it's like really expensive, you can still see someone. But it's very complicated. Most health system, even in Australia, people I've talked to, like it's hard, and you have to advocate for yourself, and that's sad. Like we shouldn't have to, but we do, and that's what it comes down to. And I guess one of the things that I've learned, and I can't stress enough, just for the chronic illness community, is like, you're not crazy. You know, don't let people tell you that you're crazy or that you
aren't experienced, but you
aren't
experienced, or that you're depressed, or like, and you might be. I was,
but that's not like the reason.
Yeah.
Like, they might not be wrong, but like,
yeah,
I'm not experiencing back pain or gut issues because I'm depressed. It's because I have like legitimately something wrong with me, you know, or a legitimate condition.
Yeah.
Obviously, you did a lot of research and you thought you had EDS. So did you kind of get all the referrals for both EDS and POTS sort of at the same time?
No, actually. From the first appointment I went to, she sent the geneticist referral. But only because I said that my mom was being like referred to a geneticist. So I got the geneticist referral from the first time. I didn't get the POTS referral until my very last appointment where my mom came with me. So yeah, so it was like a couple months apart.
Okay. And so I guess what did you do when you kind of realized that you had EDS and POTS? What was kind of what kind of the steps you took? And I guess someone who's kind of in this phase of either condition, thinking they have either EDS or POTS, what would be sort of your suggestion or something that you kind of went through for them to do, or what you did?
I feel like I've already said this before, but I think just like doing a ton of research so you understand exactly what it is, like, and like the things that help. Like with EDS, there's not as many things that you can really do for it. Like it's just managing symptoms. And so you kind of just have to go to like a bunch of individual doctors. So I would say for EDS, like you just kind of have to figure out like what your individual issues are. So like back pain, chiropractor, foot pain, podiatrist, like stuff like that. Like you have to just kind of go for individual things for like your symptoms. But for POTS, like there's things you can do before you start seeing a doctor, which I started doing. Like you're supposed to drink a ton of water and get like a lot of salt and like compression stockings and stuff like that. So I think I would just like do a ton of research, like a ton of research, so you like know it inside and out, and so you can kind of start implementing things before you get to the doctor, because you don't know how long that's going to take. I would say that's kind of my advice for it. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. And so in terms of POTS, like, can you, I guess, give me an overview of how that affects your life, and and I guess for both POTS and EDS, how that affects your life, and kind of what led you to believe, like key symptoms that led you to believe that you had these conditions?
Well, I've been like in chronic pain since I was like 7 years old. Like I came home from second grade, like crying because like my back was just hurting really, really bad. And so I like went to the chiropractor, and I've been going ever since. And like, they didn't really know what was wrong. Like he said, the muscles in my back were just like spasming, like going crazy. I'm still kind of confused why. I don't really know. But yeah, so I started having like terrible back pain, like at 7 years old. And it made school super hard. Like I would come home crying like almost every day for a few years. Like it was just terrible. And then when I was in sixth grade, so I was like 12, it just got to the point like I couldn't do it anymore. So I had to drop out and do like homeschool for like 7th and 8th grade because my back pain was terrible. And I was doing sports through that point. But then my knee pain started, and I had to quit sports because I couldn't run anymore. And then I got to high school, and everything just kind of fell apart. Like I was like injuring myself constantly from doing like nothing. I would miss like a month every year in high school because I had some major problem with my body just like not working, or like in a ton of pain where I couldn't walk. So like it's really affected like my mobility, like to get around to places. Like I've been like in and out of a wheelchair for the last like 5 years, and I've had like 4 surgeries on my feet. Like so I was like in a wheelchair for that at some points too. So I feel like with EDS, it's just been like a lot of chronic pain that has like impacted my ability to school and work.
Yeah, and like obviously that's not normal, and the people around you at the time would have kind of realized that that wasn't normal. Did you spend a lot of time in your younger years in and out of doctor's offices as well? And
oh yeah, I was going to like multiple a week, especially in high school, because like my foot pain was like terrible, and like my back pain and knee pain and stuff. So I went to like, I'm trying to remember how many years of physical therapy I've been to now. I think 6 years of physical therapy. I was going to a ton of doctor's appointments, like especially in high school, like, and no one could give me any reasons why. So I missed a ton of school. I'm really surprised I graduated, honestly. And then I haven't really been able to work because I'm just like in a lot of pain. So I would say that's kind of how EDS affects me, especially the injuries. Like I constantly injure myself from doing like normal things. So then I'm out for like 2 weeks at a time. So that doesn't really work for working.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm sorry that you deal with that. I unfortunately can relate. And I don't I don't think I have EDS. I haven't ever been sort of diagnosed, but I definitely have hypermobility, which is not uncommon, but it does bring its own set of challenges in the sense of, you have to make sure you're stabilizing your joints, and I get injured quite easily, et cetera, et cetera. So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is like a group. It's basically when you have a group of connective tissue disorders. Am I correct? Yeah. And there's different types of it as well. Like one of them is hypermobility. There's others as well. And so what are the other ones?
So I believe there's like 13 known types right now. The most common one is hypermobility. I think like 90% of people have that one. Maybe I'm wrong, but the majority of people have hypermobility. And the other like main one is called classical EDS. So the hypermobile type is like the least severe type, and the classical type is more like your skin is like super, super stretchy. Like there's like pictures of people where they're like pulling their skin up like over their face. It's crazy. And then I can't remember the names of like the 3 other ones that they don't really talk about the other ones as much because they're way more rare. I know I can't remember the names of them. Yeah.
So I was just doing some research around it. It looks like there's like classical, hypermobile, vascular, and a few others that I can't pronounce. But what's interesting is that fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue are common misdiagnosis of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Yeah.
Which is because it's like, and often people say this as well, is that CFS and fibro are like an umbrella sort of diagnosis for actually more conditions, which is not always the case. And I don't think it was really the case for me. But I think that's interesting because if you also look at the statistics, 95% of people living with EDS don't get diagnosed. And it's only 5% that are actually diagnosed. And that is equivalent to 650,000 Americans.
That's crazy.
So it's crazy. Like that's more than 500,000 Americans affected by EDS. If you put it in the context of that. And, and that's also equivalent to 1 in 10,000 or 15,000 people. So it's like, that's significant. And that's for people like yourself to be living in chronic pain for years.
Not having any idea why.
Not having any idea, not having a diagnosis. That's disappointing. And I think it's kind of just a testament to like what we're doing with both of our platforms is raising awareness about these illnesses. And it's just this sort of thing. It's actually just not okay.
I know that in the UK, they train all of their rheumatologists on EDS. Like most of the information and like statistics I've seen about EDS is like from the UK. Like they've done like a decent amount of research, but for some reason in the US, like no rheumatologists know anything about it. Like I saw some statistic that said like only 20% of rheumatologists have even like heard of it. And only 5% even really know like any actual like details about it. So no one here is informed about it like at all. And I think that's why like awareness is so important, is because I don't think I ever would have found out what it was like if it weren't for Instagram, honestly.
Yeah, that's massive. And even just there's so many people that I've even spoken with in America that kind of like I'll tell them about what I'm doing or whatever, and they're like, oh, I know this person, or I know that person that has this, and it's kind of this undiagnosed sort of weird thing where they're like just struggle, and they struggle in silence, and they don't go see the doctor because it's expensive. And I wonder, I guess I'm kind of now realizing that within American culture, it's actually kind of like really not good to be unwell.
Yep, it's really not.
It's kind of like survival of the fittest a little bit, especially with the system. And so I think that makes it really challenging because, like, I've talked to a lot of people in the UK, and there's a massive chronic illness community in the UK and pretty big as well in the US, but there seems to be more awareness both in the UK and in Australia about chronic illness and the state of chronic illness in general. I've done a lot of research specifically in Australia, and the Australian government recognizes that chronic illness is on the rise, that it represents a massive issue, not only for people, but also for the economy, because if we have people living with chronic conditions, they're putting a strain on the healthcare system, et cetera, which that's sort of from an economic perspective. So they're focusing on prevention as well. So it's like a multifaceted, we need to prevent this, we need to also offer treatment, we need to also partner with non-for-profits to help people living with these conditions. So it's interesting. And then, so that's EDS, and then POTS. So how does POTS kind of affect, what is it and how does it affect your life?
So POTS is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So essentially it means that like postural is like changing your posture. Tachycardia is like your heart rate is too fast. So it means that like when changing positions, your heart rate increases too much. Like for a normal person, like their resting heart rate versus standing heart rate, their heart rate is only supposed to increase by like 10 to 15 beats per minute. And for people with POTS, it increases like 30 or 40 beats per minute just upon standing up, or like even more. So like a lot of people like black out or pass out, like even just from standing, because your autonomic nervous system just doesn't function correctly. And autonomic nervous system is like everything that your body does without you thinking about it. So like digestion, breathing, like heart rate, blood pressure, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it basically just means like your autonomic nervous system is not functioning the way it should be. And so for me, I feel like I want to say POTS is the thing that's affecting my daily life the most right now.
Yeah.
I mean, pain isn't fun, but I don't know, like I can't exercise. Like I have like exercise intolerance right now. Like any exercise I try and do, I have to do it like laying down. But my heart rate still just gets like super fast. Like, I mean, yeah, super high, really fast. Like even when I'm just laying down, like after like 5 minutes, my heart rate is like 170 or so. Like it's really hard. And like right now I can only walk like 5 minutes. The other day I walked for like 10 minutes, but that's like the longest I've been able to walk for like 6 months. And then I'm out for hours after. So yeah, it's really affected like my mobility and to do like basic daily things. Yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, and I think what's kind of frustrating, especially about POTS, is like they don't know the cause.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we think it's an autoimmune disorder. We think these different things, but they don't know. Like they don't know the reason. And again, POTS is one of those things where it affects even more than EDS. So it's like between 1 million to 3 million Americans.
Yeah, it's more common than MS. Like it's really not like that rare. Like I think people think it's rare, but it's just because doctors don't know about it. Like it's actually fairly common. Like
yeah, and it mostly affects women. 80 to 85% of people with POTS are women between the ages of like 16 to 35.
Yeah.
Which is, there's got to be something in that as well. Like, and again, it's one of those things where it's like, we need to really be putting efforts into research, education, awareness around these conditions. And because as soon as they may not know the cause, but there are treatments, there are
options.
That's the thing. There is for POTS, where EDS, it's not really like there's no treatment for EDS, it's just managing symptoms, but like there is treatment for POTS. There's no cure, but there's treatments. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I feel like we've covered a lot of like just talking about POTS, EDS. I'm hoping that this is sort of serves as like an educational start a podcast for people that think that they might have it, etc., etc. Switching gears a little bit, I guess, what are you, like, my main question is, like, what's the next step for you? You just got diagnosis. How are you feeling? Like, hopeful? Like, you're obviously quite young, 20, you have your whole life ahead of you. Do you feel like, what do you want to achieve, and do you feel like that's possible?
The last couple months have been rough. I feel like I haven't really felt hopeful until maybe this last like week or so. Because I don't know, it just was really hard to process like 14 years worth of not knowing why, and then suddenly it's like I know what it is. I don't know. So I feel like I've kind of processed everything, and like I know what it is. I kind of know like what my game plan is. I'm living at home right now, so my plan is to like just keep going to doctor's appointments and try and like improve my quality of life so I can move out at some point. I'm hoping I can move out in maybe like 6 months or so, but it could be a year. I don't really know. So that's kind of what like short term my goal is. And then like just keep doing school, because I'm doing my online school. And I finished that in like 3 years. So that's like kind of more long term. But right now I'm just trying to get like my health better so I can move out and like get a job, because I can't right now. So,
and that's a really good, even just short-term goal to have. That was one of my goals, is like, okay, I just need to get a job, and I couldn't move out for a while, but it was more like I'm saving money so that I can move to city.
Yes, exactly.
And I did, and it was the best choice, you know. But it's that period of like, you just got to take your time, look after yourself, love yourself, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what are some things like that are like getting you through the season? What can you recommend for the community?
Find things that you like doing and just cling to them. Like when I like had to quit all sports, like I loved running and soccer and like all of that. And so like after that happened and I could not do those things anymore, I had to kind of sit there and be like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? And so then I started like learning a bunch of instruments and like singing, and like now that's my major. So I think like if it's taken something away from you, like it's okay to try and branch out and find different things. And like it doesn't mean that you failed if you can't do that thing anymore, and like let yourself grieve that if you can't do it, but like just realize there's a bunch of other things that you can do, and it's going to open more doors for you if you work hard.
Yeah, I love that. Mic drop. Word. Oh, this has been such a great conversation. I'm so glad that you've come on the podcast, and thanks so much for giving your time and sharing about your journey, about the struggles. Like it sounds like you're kind of early on in the like, I just figured it out. This is what it is. But there's so much ahead. There's so much, so much you can do. I mean, I'm so all about, like, as much as living with a chronic illness is hard and like we're limited and all of that, like there's still things we can do, you know, and
there's hope.
There's hope. There's always hope. Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and I look forward to sharing your story and your just wisdom with the community.
Well, thank you. This was super fun. Really cool.